Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to Austin Prep, and it is my great privilege as an alumnus of the class of 1989 to be here this evening for this special event to celebrate Black History Month. And it is from inside of Austin Prep in the Father Smith Library that I join you this evening. This is the epicenter of conversations and instruction throughout the school year, and I think appropriate for our dialogue tonight. An Austin Prep graduate is one who is an empathetic global learner and one who tries and seeks to understand the world around us. And so it is in that spirit this evening that we invite a friend of Austin Prep, Dr. Kuykendall, who is an author, an attorney, an educator, and just overall a really special friend to Austin Prep. Throughout the last 2 years, she has been on campus a number of times. She delivered the St. Augustine lecture last year in March and has been with us over the summer, helping us be strategic in our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. She has led us in professional development for our faculty, administrators, and staff. And in her work, I think most of the joy that she gets is from meeting with our students, which she was on campus to do in October. And we know that her message is so important to our mission here at Austin Prep that we invited her to be with the parents. And parents, it's an honor to welcome you here. You're an important part of this conversation and this dialogue as we try to fortify our future with better understandings of our past. And with that, I'd like to hand things off to Dr. Kuykendall.
Thank you so much, Bill. And let me say, first of all, to all the parents and students and faculty who have joined us tonight, it is indeed my honor to be with you. I want to thank you for giving up an evening. All evenings are precious. And the very fact that you have tuned in tonight says a lot about you. I also want to thank Dr. Hickey for his leadership and for the opportunity and the invitation I have been given to work with Austin Prep and to work with the incredible faculty and students to make sure that Austin Prep fulfills its mission. And everyone knows that mission is to create a very well-rounded, incredibly gifted, highly informed student body that will go out and make their places in the world. You have come tonight to be informed. We've called this session, this webinar, I just want to call it a conversation. We've called it Fortifying Our Future for a Better Understanding of Our Past. And to do that, it means that we must understand all of our history. It means we have to explore all of our past. And so tonight, walk with me, if you will. And we're going to take a journey and look at why the understanding of our past is so very important to fortifying our future. I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint.
And as Dr. Kuykendall does that and gets set up, I wanted to provide all of you with the format for tonight. She'll go through this presentation for about 50 minutes, and we will have a question and answer session at the end that will last about 10 minutes. And so please feel free to offer questions throughout, and I will synthesize those at the end so that we have your voice in here as well. So Crystal, I'll hand things off to you.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you can all see the screen. The big AP logo is right there, Fortifying Our Future Through a Better Understanding of Our Past. Why do we go back? Why is it necessary to even look at the past? Why is it that families trace their histories and schools deal with history? Why do we even bother with the past? Well, I'm so glad you asked. There's an ancestral tribe out of Ghana in West Africa came up with the term Sankofa. Simply put, Sankofa simply means we must go back and reclaim our past so that we can move forward and understand how and why we came to be. This is true for all of us, whether we're talking about our own families, our communities, and certainly our race and our nation. And so in the spirit of Sankofa, want to take a step back, but also want to make sure that we understand why that step back is so very, very important. When we take a step back now, we're really talking about understanding Black history. This is Black History Month, but the good thing about Austin Prep is they realize that history, all history, has to be incorporated into every discipline. And so while we're talking about Black history tonight, this is not all history. We're really dealing with American history. What we know is that the study of Black history can address a lot of things. First of all, it can help us deal with the challenge of forgetting. Now, I do know, I totally understand that a lot of us want to forget mistakes. Many of us want to forget disappointments. A lot of us want to forget embarrassments. Who wants to remember any shameful experience? Carlene Tambo. Well, the reality is sometimes forgetting is a detriment. And what I want us to do is to realize that parts of our history, even if painful, must still be discovered so that we can move forward and have a better path, a better future based on a painful past. And so the challenge of forgetting means helping us to look at things that may have been embarrassing, things that may have been disappointing, things that may have even been mistakes, and help us to grow from those mistakes. If you're a parent, as I am, I know you know that one of the things we always try to do is to help our children learn from their mistakes. And so it is even with a nation. Our nation has made mistakes in the past, and certainly in looking at our past, we're able to flesh out those mistakes so that we can move forward. But we also have a challenge, and that challenge is preserving the culture of other people. The wonderful thing about this great nation of ours is that we are indeed a very diverse nation. But I like to say that we're not really a melting pot. What we really are is we're a salad bowl. Got some lettuce in there, some tomatoes in there, some black olives for seasoning. We are strong because we are different. And when we explore other cultures, when we understand other cultures, it allows us to fortify our own minds and to be better in not only understanding, but better in being more sensitive to the needs and the contributions of those cultures. And so Black History Month allows us to do that. It allows us to look at the many cultures that comprise the Black experience. And then there's a challenge of strengthening a community. Our communities are our foundation. The more we understand our communities, the better we can strengthen our communities. What we want to do is to create within the Austin Prep community a community of caring, caritas. But with that community of caring, we can also be transformed and become more knowledgeable and more sensitive. A community of caring can become a nation of caring. And that's what we want to bring out in our students. The power of drawing inspiration from the past. That is so important. We can learn from the resilience. We can learn from the creativity. We can learn from all of the many contributions of people who are no longer with us. We draw inspiration from struggles. We draw inspiration from victories. We learn when we can take triumph out of tragedy. And so in drawing inspiration from the past, our hope is that our students and this entire community will be stronger, more inspired, and in fact, even more resilient as a result of looking critically and honestly at our past, and that means our history. And then the other thing that we know history, Black history can do, is it can rid us of the misunderstandings that are born of a lack of information. I'm sure you've been in discussions before with people and you felt if they just knew what you knew, they wouldn't be arguing with you. Well, a lot of times we find that truth will set you free. And the more you know, the better you will understand. But lack of information is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing because it leads to bad decision making. And so we study Black history because we know it will not only help us to have a better understanding, but it will allow us to make better decisions. And our students will be better for it. We also know that Black History Month came about through the work of one incredible human being by the name of Carter G. Woodson. And I have to tell you a little something. I belong to a church in Washington, D.C. Our church was founded by 21 slaves in 1863, 21 freed slaves, I should add. And our church sits on the corner in Washington, D.C. We get a lot of tourists who stop by our church, and that is because our church is located about 4 doors down from the historic home of Carter G. Woodson. It is a tourist attraction, gets a lot of visitors. Well, not now because all the museums in DC are closed. But Carter G. Woodson, on February 1st, 1926, created something known then as Black History Week. However, during the 60s, Blacks in colleges and universities all over the country came to a conclusion that a week was not enough. And so it morphed into Black History Month, and it was celebrated as Black History Month on Black campuses, a lot of white campuses. I went to Southern Illinois University, and I am told that at SIU, Black History Month was celebrated long before Gerald Ford officially designated February as Black History Month. Now, the interesting thing is, I have been to Canada during their Black History Month. I also know that the UK has a Black History Month. Germany does also, I found out. And we're finding out that what other countries are doing is what we should have been doing a long time ago. They are celebrating diversity. They are learning from diverse citizens. They are strengthening their fiber as nations because they have chosen to look at those things that contribute to their strength. And so I have a quote there. Those who have no record of what forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history. Those are the words of Carter G. Woodson. But understand, Carter G. Woodson was not the only one who championed Black history. We know that countless others have done so as well. And these are just a few. We know that Black history is American history. We also know, and you can look at these quotes, but just in case you can't see them all, Michelle Obama said, "Don't ever underestimate the importance you can have because history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own." We do know that because of history, the more we know, the better we are. We know that Black History Month is a time to pay homage to our ancestors. We do know that their lifelong struggles and the influence they had on liberties we have obtained is a good thing. I was actually impressed. I heard a student in a program I attended yesterday talk about the fact that he is so much better because of the history class that he wanted to drop. And so we also know Bill Frist reminded us, and in case you don't know anything about Bill Frist, he is a Republican, a conservative Republican, former majority leader of the Senate, out of the state of Tennessee, a red state, very strong conservative views. But he is quoted as saying, "The African-American experience is one of the most important threads in the American tapestry." And so we find that it's not just the administrators and the faculty at Austin Prep, but we join countless others around the world in understanding that the more we appreciate our history, the better we are as a people, the better we are as a nation. But I want to share with you something from a person who should be familiar, I know, with the students and any alumni who attended Austin Prep. These are the words of St. Augustine of Hippo. Now, we do know that he was born in Africa. We know he was a theologian who influenced Western Christianity. We also know that through his teachings, we have come up with those 3 words that we often use, veritas, caritas, and unitas. Look at his quotes. He said that the world is a book, and those who do not travel read only a page. How fitting it is, even if you can't travel physically. History, the study of history, allows you to travel with your mind. As a young girl, I remember I reading book after book after book, and my imagination was so fertile. I look back now and think, where would I have been had I not been able to travel as much as I did through the books that I read? And so we realized that we're giving our children a world experience. We are giving our future leaders an opportunity to travel and to read much more than a page. Since love grows within you, so beauty grows. For love is the beauty of the soul. I love that quote. It reminds us of what love really is and caring. And so out of that quote, we can see caritas. But I should also hasten to add that the first quote, the world is a book and those who do not travel read only a page, that's veritas. We want our students to know more. We want them to know the truth. God loves each of us as if there were only one of us. Unitas. We are one people. We are one solid, strong community. We may come in different shades. We may come in different colors, different races, different cultures. But in the final analysis, we are indeed one. Unitas. This is how God sees us and how God loves us. And then one of my favorites, charity is no substitute for justice withheld. Think about that for a minute. Sometimes we talk about charity, but what St. Augustine wanted us to know is that we must have charity along with justice. And a lot of times justice comes because we are more knowledgeable, we are more informed. Charity is no substitute for justice withheld. Well, that is an example of caritas. And so you see right there what St. Augustine does is he reminds us of why we are. We are here as an institution because we want our students to go forward with truth, with love and caring, and as a united body. And so let's take a look. This is where our journey begins. When we talk about veritas, it's truth. And we have to seek truth through minds that inquire. I think it's really nice that this year and in years to come, students at Austin Prep are going to learn a lot about historic African kings and queens. There was history for African people prior to 1619. And this is just a few of the ancient kings and queens. We do know that the pyramids were built by Africans who toiled and labored. It's still a mystery as to how these great structures were actually built, how they figured out geometrically how to do all of that. We know that the intelligence of Africans way back then was incredible. We also know that Africa as a continent has some of the richest minerals and jewels. And so we want our students to understand that the pictures of bloated bellies and hungry children, that is not all Africa. We want them to understand the continent in a way that will help them to appreciate the contributions of those whose ancestors came from that continent. It's also important that we remember, people may say that slaves were taken from Africa, but that is not true. People, real live human beings who had lives and families, they were taken from Africa and were made into slaves. But the truth certainly continues. There are a lot of things I'm sure all of you have heard about. Surely we understand that the Harlem Renaissance was a period of tremendous pride and great success for African-American people. The Harlem Renaissance, for those of you who don't know, and the students will be studying a lot more, was in the 1920s. And that's when Harlem became sort of like the epicenter of Black culture and Black pride. It was in Harlem that they opened up many clubs, a Cotton Club. And understand it was called the Cotton Club because even though they had Black entertainers, the club only admitted whites. And so Cotton Club, but the Black entertainers who performed there, some of them are pictured right here on the screen. Many of us know about Duke Ellington, but there are others. And those incredibly gifted musicians not only entertained the audience at the Cotton Club, but they also created the music that so many people love even today. The drawing that you see to the far right is Claude McKay, incredible artist that came out of the 1920s. But this is a picture of the nightlife out of Harlem, the dancing, the piano playing, and the happy feelings that came. A lot of that culture is still with us. When we look at poetry that was written during that decade of the 20s, it's evident that those poems speak of the life, the culture, the joy, and even some of the sadness that came out of that era. The picture that you see on the bottom is the billowing smoke that came out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you've never heard of Black Wall Street, there will be a documentary later this year that looks at what actually happened during those 5 days, the end of May to June in 1921. I won't get into all of the details now, but I will tell you the actual result. And that is most of the city of Tulsa was burned to the ground. Tulsa was a city that was populated by Black businesses. It was called the Black Wall Street. But because of racial hate, really, a group of white vigilantes came through Tulsa and literally burned it to the ground. We know that thousands lost their lives, hundreds of businesses and homes were destroyed. But out of those ashes came a renewed spirit. Out of those ashes, we see more determination. And so we want to help our students to appreciate and understand that even when we've had moments in our history that were not pleasant, that were not good, we can grow and we can learn and be better for it. But truth also allows us to move forward and understand that before we even got into the Black Renaissance, we understood that there was something called the Black Reconstruction. What you see on the screen now are two images of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. The wonderful thing, even during a pandemic, is the students at Austin Prep have been given opportunities to have some virtual tours, virtual lessons, and virtual information sessions that help to focus on some of the history of that particular time. Those gentlemen that you see on the bottom left of the screen, there are 7 of them. Well, these were all Black men who were elected to Congress or the US Senate right after Blacks were emancipated. I don't have the names on the screen, or well, actually the names are on the screen, but they're probably too small for you to read. And so let me just tell you who's pictured there. First, there's Robert C. Long, who was out of South Carolina, elected to Congress. Jefferson Long came out of Georgia, no relationship. Senator Hiram Rebels was the first Black to serve in the Senate, and he came out of Mississippi. Ben Turner is sitting next to him, and he was a congressperson from Alabama. And next to him is Jonah Wells, who was a congressman out of Florida. The final 2 who are sitting closer to the end on the first row are Joseph Rainey and Robert Brown Elliott, and both of them were South Carolina. Now you notice something, all of these are Southern states. It should give you some indication that after slaves were emancipated, races came together. These people were elected not by Black people, but by all of the people in their states. And they served admirably. In fact, Hiram Rebels served 2 terms in the US Senate. Incredible when you think about that time. The gentleman that you see on the far right is W.E.B. Du Bois, known for his historical accounts of what happened during the Black Reconstruction. His writings have been incredible. One of the things that he talks about a lot of things, souls of Black folks, Black double consciousness, but his writings on the Black Reconstruction help to remind us of many, many significant contributions. But there is still more, because even after slavery and serving admirably in the Civil War, African Americans served in the First World War. Now, on the screen, there are boxes that just give you some of the pictures of those images. You see the uniforms, you see the pictures of some of the soldiers, you see the helmets. And in fact, that helmet is from France. We see that they had respirators. We see some of the tools that not only those in the Army used, but those in the Navy as well. What we do know is that through their service in the First World War, Blacks were able to come home. And even though they faced discrimination, which we know they did, even though many of them were unable to have lives like the lives that they thought they were going to have, they continued to serve their nation. World War I, it is often said, is won partly because of the efforts of so many Blacks who served during that war. And yet, we also know that even while they served in the war, they also worked and toiled as scientists. Some of the inventions, and on the screen, you see only a few. It is estimated that there were 540 inventions of Blacks since the Reconstruction. These are a few that you may know well. Benjamin Banneker is well known. He not only created an almanac, the first farmer's almanac, but he has one of the most detailed clocks you will ever see. We know that the baby buggy, I should say, came from a gentleman by the name of William Richardson. We know that the blood plasma bag, and if you've ever had blood plasma or blood transfusions, you've seen those bags. Well, before the work of Charles Drew, blood plasma was not able to be extracted. Charles Drew made a tremendous contribution. If you're using a cell phone, well, just know that the very first car phone was also invented by a Black man. We know that the corn harvester, that may not mean a whole lot to you, but it meant a lot to those farmers who had to use that corn harvester. We know that the elevator and the electric lamp are also inventions that we continue to use every day. And I don't know about you, but many people take some of these things for granted. The fire extinguisher, well, even if you don't use it, I know you're glad when you see one around, but that too was invented by a Black man, Thomas Martin. The gas mask. I've probably seen more gas masks in the last couple of months than last couple of years, but gas masks were invented also by a Black man. It is often said that Black musicians learn how to play the guitar. Well, they didn't just learn how to play it, they also invented it. The next time you have an ice cream cone, I want you to thank a Black man who came up with the idea of having ice cream on a cone. Augustus Jackson is one of my favorites because I love ice cream, but I also appreciate Thomas Stewart's mop. Before the mop, people were cleaning floors on their hands and knees. Now, there may be some who still do, but I am really glad that there is a mop. Where would we be without mailboxes? There used to be a Pony Express to deliver mail. Well, Philip Browning changed all that when he invented the mailbox. A whole new way of delivering and receiving our mail. And then we know that the lawnmower came about as a result of John Burr. We know that the imaging X-ray that many of us probably have benefited from, also a Black man. If you love peanut butter, you've got to love George Washington Carver. He figured out a way to take that peanut and turn it into something that could be eaten regularly in a sandwich as a topping, but that was his invention. If you love potato chips, as I surely do, then you've got to also appreciate the great work of Huron Thomas. The straightening comb, Madam C.J. Walker, she was the first Black woman to be a millionaire. She also understood that Black women's hair required special attention. I truly appreciate Madam C.J. Walker. The traffic light. The next time you are stalled in traffic, or the next time you avoid an accident, just say a little thank you to Garrett Morgan. Now, there's not pictured there of the golf tee. I thought about that just yesterday when we heard the news of Tiger Woods. But the golf tee was also invented by a Black man. Well, as I said, there are many, countless others, not countless because we've got a ballpark figure of over 500. But these inventions help us to appreciate the genius, the creativity, the tremendous sacrifices that Blacks made to advance the nation that they love. These inventions are with us every single day. And thank God for that. But the doctors, the scientists, that's just a small piece of it. If we look at our current history right now, we can see evidence. I don't know how common this knowledge is, but the Moderna vaccine, Kizzmekia Corbett, is responsible for creating the team that put together. Actually, she is credited with doing much of the work for the vaccine that we're now using for COVID-19. Incredible young woman, scientist by training, but she did a great deal. She was inspired by Henrietta Lacks, who is considered the mother of modern medicine. As a young woman, she watched and wanted so much to be a nurse. But when she began to work along with doctors, she got a degree and is now considered one of the experts of her time in dealing with modern medicine. And of course, George Washington Carver, I've already mentioned him, but he provided us not only with an understanding of the peanut, but also gardening techniques that are still being used to this very day. The caring of Black physicians is something that all of us can appreciate. But those who you see pictured are some of those who have been among the first. Now, there is not a picture of one of the earliest Black doctors in 1721, and I said 1721, in the state of Massachusetts, or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a slave by the name of Onesimus told his master that while he was in Africa, he learned about a vaccination that could be used to treat smallpox. He's actually considered one of the early doctors. In 1721, his master was able to take that information and use it in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to save many, many lives. But look at those who you see pictured. In addition to Kizzmekia Corbett, you also see Dr. James Durham. Now, he's the first one that you see pictured, and he's out of 1762. That's probably why that doesn't look like a real photograph, more like a drawing. Well, that's because James Durham was the first African-American physician. He never actually received a degree, but he learned from his physician owners, and he was able to be very successful in the practice of medicine in New Orleans. Pictured right next to him is Dr. James McCune Smith, the first Black doctor to practice with a medical degree. Now, he was born in 1813, and he earned his degree in Glasgow, Scotland. But after earning his degree in Scotland, he came back to the United States and practiced medicine for practically pennies. Back in those days, doctors made house calls. I don't know if any of you all remember, but house calls used to be common, actually up until about maybe 40 years ago. But he was one of those earliest who began to use all that. Dr. Rebecca Crumple is pictured right next to him. She looks so young, and yet she was the first Black woman to earn a medical degree in the United States. She started as a nurse. She practiced in Richmond, Virginia. She was born, as I said, in 1831. But again, she, like the others before her, worked because they cared. We want our students to be inspired by those who worked, not necessarily because they were looking for more money, but because they were looking to save more lives. Pictured next to her is Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. He is one of the early surgeons. He worked at Freedman's Hospital. He is considered one of the most successful surgeons. Now, I mentioned that the others didn't make a lot of money. Well, he kind of broke that. Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, because he was a chief surgeon at Freedman's Hospital, was called into duty quite often. Pictured next to him is Dr. Alexa Irene Kennedy. Now, she was the first Black neurosurgeon. If you've ever had neurosurgery, you know the intricacy of working with those tiny, tiny nerves. Well, she was the first Black actually to do that. Now, we're going to the bottom, and on the bottom, you see Dr. Alexander Augusta, the first Black physician who was appointed director of the U.S. hospital. He was born free in 1825, but he had to go to Canada to earn his medical degree. Similar to Dr. James Smith, who went to Glasgow, Scotland. Well, he also realized that if he was going to get a degree, it might have to be in another country. Pictured right next to him is Dr. Patricia Bath, the first Black woman to earn her medical degree as a doctor of white patients. Many of those who I've discussed already were not allowed to treat whites because whites did not want a Black physician. They could create tools that were used, they could create the procedures, but they could not actually treat whites. And that was because of the prejudice at that time. There is a picture right next to her of Charles Drew, who I mentioned earlier, because of his work with blood plasma. And Dr. Charles Drew, I should also add, grew up in Washington, D.C., one of the early generations of Blacks in Washington, D.C. And he has created an ancestry, descendants who are all still medical doctors. Pictured next to him is Dr. Myra Adele Logan, and she was the first woman to perform open heart surgery. And next to her is Dr. Robert Byrd, who actually became the first Black. He was a co-founder of what is now known as the National Medical Association. There was an American Medical Association that would not allow Blacks to join, just like there was an American Bar Association that would not allow Black attorneys to join. And so this medical doctor is the founder of what is known and still exists, the National Medical Association. As I said, all of these were first, but the history of Blacks is full of people who cared enough to look beyond income, but to do what's right. I want to start with the last box that you see, and those are the Tuskegee Airmen. Now, there have been movies, there have been books. We know that the Tuskegee Airmen were famous. They're called Red Tails, but they flew during World War II. They were victorious in World War II. They conquered in World War II, but they came home to face incredible discrimination. And yet their stories continue to be told. Black astronauts are all over the place, and these are really just a few. There's Mae Jemison, and I have to mention Mae because I got a chance to be on a program with her. We are members of the same sorority, and I found her absolutely delightful. But she talked about the fact that it was not easy becoming an astronaut. It certainly did not pay the money that she thought she would be earning, but that didn't matter. She and all the other astronauts that you see pictured cared enough to take the time to do the study, take the time to make the difference. What you see now on the screen should give us some indication of how we use the humanities, how we use the arts, how we use creativity to define who we are, not just as a people, but as a nation. I think you ought to feel good knowing that your students, your children, are going to be able to experience Black arts in such a way that they will have a unique appreciation of the creativity they also have. I have a drawing on the screen of contemporary Black art, but next to that, the second one looks like a bunch of cutouts. Well, that is one of the incredible pieces of work by Romare Bearden. Romare Bearden, I've got his artwork all over my house, but he sort of captured communities. He captured the feeling of a people. He captured Black life during, before, and since the Black Renaissance. He is considered one of the foremost geniuses when it comes to the storytelling and how we can use Black art to tell the story of a people. If you ever get a chance to look at some of his work, they published books that are about this thick that have some of his paintings and some of his work available. Again, not that his family is looking to create money from what he did, but Romare Bearden is one of the giants who helps us to appreciate our own inner creativity. I've got on the next slide just a lot of pictures of musicians. Some you may know, some you may not. But these are just some of the images of Blacks who have provided entertainment through the years. Aretha Franklin, Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, and many, many, many others. I'm still inspired by that music, and hopefully you will be too. Pictured beneath them, these are Black authors and playwrights who have made a significant contribution. Richard Wesley was one of the earliest to write stories, short stories about Black life. Lorraine Hansberry, if you've ever heard of the movie A Raisin in the Sun, the movie is based on the poem by Langston Hughes, but Lorraine Hansberry was the playwright. She died young, she was only 34, but the contributions that she made before she died are incredible. My high school in Chicago features a lot of her work because she grew up very close to where my high school was located, and her children, their children, their children continue to go to that high school. And so she is considered a hometown hero for me. Charles Fuller, James Baldwin, August Wilson. August Wilson, I have to tell you, is one of the still celebrated playwrights. The play that he wrote, Fences, is received so many accolades. And if you've not had a chance to explore the work of August Wilson, you will absolutely love it. And then that bottom row of slides, these are simply plays that many of you may have seen, but if you haven't, these are plays that remind us not only of creativity, but stories that need to be told. The Song of Solomon is a book written by Toni Morrison, incredible story of strength and resilience. We also know that the stories, there are many, many, many stories of the Underground Railroad and what that was all about. We know that The Color Purple by Alice Walker is not only a book that continues to be read, but it has been a movie, it has been a play. It continues to be extolled for the virtues and that it brings out. And also, it reminds us of the resilience of Black women. We do know that many of us are familiar with the civil rights movement, but at Austin Prep, we're going to be teaching about civil rights in a way that students can connect with the struggles and appreciate, not feel bad about what happened, not feel bad about the fact that there had to be a movement, but to understand that when people seek truth, when they care, we have to be united around common goals. And so civil rights should help us to appreciate not just the fact that the demonstrations were needed, but appreciate what came out of those demonstrations. Pictured is Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was a dirt poor woman, youngest of 22 children, poor out of Mississippi, but she made a name for herself when she started to get involved in the civil rights movement. And she is quoted often because she is the one who reminded us that she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. But the other images that you see are all images from the civil rights movement that should help us to appreciate the fact that during the 50s and the 60s, it was necessary to call attention to injustices. And as a result of those nonviolent protests, we know that laws were changed, and we hope that many hearts continue to be changed as we look at what that history was all about. We also know that many Black athletes have carried the torch of social justice. Now, I am a sports enthusiast. I am a sports aficionado. I love all sports, but like so many others, I have come to appreciate what many Black athletes have done to enhance our understanding of history and our appreciation of the need for more justice. Pictured first, you see Jack Johnson. I'm sorry. Jack Johnson was the first Black heavyweight, but he was also one of the most discriminated against because he happened to have a white wife. In fact, he had to leave this country because this country created a law. It was called the Mann Act and said you were guilty of a crime if you actually crossed state lines with a white woman. And so he had to live in Europe for a long time before he actually came back to this country. Many people have seen pictures of John Carlos and Tommy Smith, who in the 1968 Olympics wanted to draw attention to the struggle of Black people. Remember, 1968, if you know anything about history, was a tumultuous time. Not only did we lose Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, but by the time the Olympics came in October, there were still unspeakable crimes against Black people. And so by raising a clenched fist, all they wanted to do was to call attention to the fact that injustices persisted and that they were united in sharing their voice. Now, the white runner who was in front of them, he came in second, and he actually stood with them and was ostracized in his own country of Australia because he took a stand with them. That's changed now. Australia is now in most of the major cities. They have demonstrations. In fact, they continue now to lift him up as one of the early heroes. There's another picture there of Blacks who were kneeling, not kneeling because of any anti-US feelings, but kneeling to draw attention to the fact that the national anthem needed to reflect the contributions of Black Americans. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar continues to be a real hero when it comes to looking at Black issues. He has written, he has demonstrated, he has spoken out. He is truly one of the giants that I admire. My favorite athlete of all time, Muhammad Ali. Love the man, still love the man, but many of you know that he suffered a tremendous price when he tried to bring unity among races. And you know, it's interesting because he did that. After he was restored to his rightful title, he continued to bring people together. I have 6 images of Naomi Osaka because when she won the US Open, she chose to call attention to Blacks who were victims of white vigilantism, victims of police brutality, and victims of hate crimes. And so every tennis match, and she brought 7 masks because she expected to be there for 7 matches. And so those 7 masks, each one had the name of one of those Black persons who had been killed, as I said, because of hate, police brutality, or a combination. I have Serena there and FloJo pictured because they have given millions to promote social justice causes. Sports very often brings people together. But here at Austin Prep, students will learn more about how we can use sports heroes to provide the kind of information and the inspiration so needed to make a critical difference. We are united in our love of sports. We need to be more united in our love for what sports figures have done to promote healing, unity, and social justice. What you see here on this slide is another reminder that Black history isn't just about history. Every year since 1976, Black History Month has had a theme. Well, the theme this year is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. Because we know that Black families reflect our culture. Black families are as diverse as some races around the world. But in highlighting the Black family, we want to promote that unity. In highlighting the Black family, we want to help all families come together, because I'm sure all of you know, there's divisions in every family, no matter what the race or socioeconomics. But when we are united, we can see that we are all family and we're all connected in some kind of way. I want all of us to understand, however, that the students at Austin Prep are being prepared for a future that they will help to shape. What you see are images of Blacks, whites, Asians, races, diverse races all over the world who have come together. I have pictures of a Black leadership organization, or I should say a student leadership organization out of Canada. There is a picture of a student organization out of the UK. We know that students all over the world participated in demonstrations this summer. We know that new leaders are emerging every day. And on the bottom left screen, you see one of those new leaders who is taking his place. Josh Savers was not only a product of Austin Prep. We are in touch regularly, and I keep reminding him that he will help to unite a nation. But he will join Amanda Gorman, whose quote I have on the screen. She reminded us that while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. We're shaping and molding Austin Prep students so that they will go out realizing that history is being made every day. They will take their rightful places with an eye on the future, but understanding history will speak about what we do right now. I also did not include her quote, but she also said, we want to see the light, but we also want to be the light. And you can't be the light if you don't know truth. You can't be the light if you don't have love and caring. You can't be the light if you're not trying to bring people together. Finally, I want to share with you quotes of two people I have come to love even more as a result of their stories. They are inspirations. Barack Obama, the first African-American man to be elected president of the United States, reminded us of the importance of unity. He said, it starts with a change in our attitudes, broadening our minds. And when we broaden our minds, we do broaden our hearts. Kamala Harris, who continues to inspire so many. Not only is she a Black woman, but she was educated at a historically Black college and university right here in Washington, D.C., Howard University. I have to also say she is my soror. We happen to be in the same sorority. But she reminded us our strength is because our unity is our strength. Unity is our strength. I can't say that enough. Unity is our strength. Diversity is our power. There are some who think if you're diverse, you must be deficient. If you're diverse, something must be wrong. But diversity, we know, is our power. My friends, this has just been a brief journey. I only wanted to give you just a thumbnail sketch of some of the things that we hope to infuse into the curriculum, some of the things that we hope will add to the truth-seeking, the love and caring, and the unity that comes out of Austin Prep. Like I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It is my hope that each one of you will be even more excited about the things that we know will come out of this year and years to come. I would love to respond to any questions that anyone may have. So please, if you have some, I'm glad to hear them.
Hi, Crystal. We have some questions for you here,
Great.
and they're really excellent. I want to begin by thanking you for that informative presentation. I know I learned a lot from you in a short period of time this evening. But I wanted to share with the Austin Prep community that you have been working with us all year on this, and I want to make sure that I don't forget to thank Jacob Morales, who worked with you on this strategic plan for
Absolutely.
Black History Month, and his role as the coordinator of inclusive programming. So Jacob, I know you're in the audience, so thank you for your hard work.
Jacob.
There's also a committee that is dedicated to mission and inclusion. And so in my role as the assistant head, I also am heading that committee and working on integrating academics. And so I know there's some young folks out there in terms of parents who have students in the middle school, and they may not be aware of this, but there are classes that Mr. Piscini and Mrs. Putney have put together as students have more voice and choice as they get older, that are dedicated specifically to Black voices and to studying Africa. And so we want to thank them for their leadership on that as well. Dr. Blewett and the science department integrated your great suggestion to put together a more knowledgeable Austin Prep community about the inventions of Black America. I certainly didn't know how much they have contributed in so many critical ways. And so her middle school students have done a month's worth of presentations on that. And that was that, in cooperation and partnership with you. And I think also we want to add that your work with our faculty has been really instrumental and recognizing that this is not a 1 month conversation. This is an ongoing conversation that really is never truly finished because we have so much work to do. And so I wanted to add that before I asked a question. And the first question came from somebody who asked, what would you recommend students read? Specifically, what do you think are the most powerful reads they can find, and what authors would you recommend?
Now, how much time do we have? It depends on what the interest is. Now, if it's history, if you just want history, then I would say Lerone Bennett, Before the Mayflower. It's an incredible historical piece. But you have a historian right there in Massachusetts who has written quite a bit, Henry Louis Gates. And in fact, he just had a 4-hour special that appeared on public broadcasting last week about the Black church. His historical writings have been incredible. You can probably find anything on Henry Louis Gates right there. It is historical. When we start looking at more contemporary history, I shared some of those authors with you. But again, it depends on what you want out of the books you are reading. When I taught Black studies years ago, and even now, I continue to look at some of the writings of people like Nikki Giovanni. Even though she wrote poetry, much of her poetry deals with history. I still look at writings of Lerone Bennett. I still look at biographies because they are historical accounts. And so I can't tell you that one author is any better than another one, but I will tell you that some authors are much more comprehensive in their work. And the ones that I mentioned, I think have sort of shaped history in a way that helps us to appreciate it and to understand it.
The next question comes from one of our teachers, and she is a math teacher, and she's wondering if there's any mathematicians that you could recommend that would help her in educating her students.
Well, the scientists have been mathematicians. When you start looking at math and science, they do come together. Now, one of the things that I sent you, Bill, deals with one of the learning programs from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And they're looking at STEM programs. They're looking at math and science. There is a National Science Foundation, and I know your teachers know about that. But the Blacks who are a part of that organization have also created some modules and some learning tools that can be used. So I would suggest going to the National Science Foundation's website and finding out more about what they are doing right now to advance history and to recognize the contributions of Blacks in science and math.
Thank you. And I've visited those learning labs. They're really outstanding, especially in this environment where we can't really go into a museum and manipulate the information in front of us or engage with it. And this gives students the opportunity to do so at their own pace and time. And I'll be sure to share that with that particular math teacher. This question's a little bit tricky, but I think, as an attorney, you can handle this one. I have two moms who have two different perspectives. And so one is asking about how do white students act as allies and really push the needle and respectfully say, like, students should feel bad about the history and do something about it. And another parent who said, students shouldn't feel bad about the history. What we should be working on is the future. And so there's those two moms asking you that question. What's the next step? How do we, as parents, help our children?
We need not feel bad about history. First of all, we didn't do it. We're not those who made the history. We're making history right now. And so when I said the challenge of forgetting, I wanted to remind us that, yeah, there's some painful parts of our history. There are some parts of history that make me sad, make me mad. But I have grown from that understanding. And so we don't want anyone to get mad. What we want people to be so glad that people were able to come out of that, united, come out of all of those bad things, able to do great things. And so my advice to white students is soak up as much knowledge as you can, help to educate others, and use that knowledge to help to change laws, use that knowledge to help to change hearts and minds. But no, we don't want anybody to feel bad or shamed. There's no room for that. We want people to feel excited. We want people to feel powerful, to be empowered to go out and to change other thinking.
Also, you mentioned Josh and your comments earlier, and you may not be aware of this, but he was recently elected president of the freshman class at
Oh,
the
he
College
told
of
me.
Holy
As
Cross.
soon as the election happened, he called me. Josh and I stay in touch. We just talked 2 nights ago. He's so upset that he couldn't participate tonight. He's got, as I said, a 3-hour biology lab. But that's why I included his picture. And I told him I was going to include it.
I wanted to make sure you were aware that he won that election, and we're very
won the
proud of him
election,
and
and
his
I
work.
was happy for him.
And we appreciate your work with him, and as well as thinking about Josh at college, there's a question about hiring for more diversity. And so we have been able to hire some more folks this year, obviously with the growth at Austin Prep here over the summer, and with some retirements, we've been able to expand our base, and we have 4 new teachers of color who are on staff. But you have a plan for us, and you've mentioned some ways that you think we can recruit. Would you like to share that with the parents?
Well, one of the things that I do want to do, and because of the pandemic, it's been very, very hard to reach people. Most of the colleges and universities are working virtually. And many of the people, when you call the central number, you don't get the central person. I have talked to a couple of deans of education who have indicated that they will try to reach out to more graduates, particularly graduates in the New England area who would not have to move, to tap into what you need at Austin Prep. But just know that it is a process and it is ongoing. And my commitment is to bring you not just superficial diversity, but the kind of diverse thoughts and the depth of understanding that I think will make the critical difference. That is an ongoing process, but do know it is a priority for me.
And this is our last question. I want to be respectful of your time, and it is a great question, I think, to end this is, will you be involved in future efforts here at Austin Prep, especially in diversity and inclusion?
Well, I certainly hope so.
We do too.
That's not my decision, but I certainly hope so. Let me just say before we close how much I have appreciated the opportunity. Bill, you have been absolutely wonderful. I am so excited about your leadership and what you bring to this whole endeavor. You have worked with diverse populations throughout your adult life, and I believe that Austin Prep is blessed to have you there. Jim Hickey, I'm biased. I love the man. I've known him in other lives. I've known him for about 15 years. I know where his heart is. I love working with Jim. He wears his feelings on his sleeves, and I like that. I love his commitment and his dedication. Having Jacob there, Jacob knows how much I love him. I'm excited about where you're going. I'm excited, and hopefully I will be a part of the process. This is only the tip of the iceberg. I've got a lot more that I would love to share. And so the more I am asked, I won't say no, but do know that is my hope.
Well, Crystal, thank you so much for joining us. And to the 120 plus parents who joined us, students and administrators, thank you so much. This is an ongoing effort. We will continue to have these kind of webinars, and we are very thankful and blessed that Crystal's in our life and is providing guidance and leadership to our school. Everyone, have a great night.
Thank you.